let's get it started.
Okay, should we start now? Do you think, Iman? Let's just get going. Yeah. So
Yes.
I think it's a good practice to start on time. I like to do that. So I'm seeing a lot of people joining, lots of familiar names. So hello, Roland. Yeah, welcome to everyone, and thanks for joining us. And in this continued, troubling times for everyone in Sydney. So we said all throughout this year we'd love to be able to get back live, and we did once, right? We got one session in, I think, Iman, sometime during the middle of the year, and then it sort of fell apart again. So it was a bit sad. And look, I think realistically our Christmas get-together is probably not going to happen either this year, but I'm just optimistic about next year, so I'm really hoping and looking forward to something better next year. So welcome, thanks for joining us online. Thanks to Artiom joining us today. So Artiom is part of Iman's team, and he's going to be our key, in fact, probably our only speaker today. So thanks for joining us, Artiom, and I know he's got some pretty cool stuff on slices, and he's going to do a really deep dive on that for us. So
thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no worries. And I always just like to say thanks to Iman and his company, Agile Analytics, for being the ongoing sponsors. There's a lot of work that goes into this stuff, and Iman, so thanks as always, mate, for helping this come together. So Iman, is anything from you, or do you want to just sort of jump straight into Artiom and have a look at the main presentation?
Not much. Maybe I just share my screen for 1 second. Now I changed my mind. Actually, I said initially no, but maybe
I've got one of those. I've got one of those jumpers that you've got.
Yes, I got it. How cool is that? So basically, I just wanted to share a couple of slides whilst Artiom gets ready. So as you know, Agile Analytics is a boutique consulting firm. We do end-to-end Microsoft data analytics with teams in Australia, New Zealand, and the US now. We do data platform integration, BI, reporting, and advanced analytics. So if you need help with any of those, please feel free to contact me or anyone in my team. Application integration with low-code apps in Power Apps, Power Automate, flows, and with data management, BI, and AI ML. So yeah, that's basically about us. One update that I have, Matt, and I don't know if you noticed, I was checking the exam DA100 yesterday, and I noticed that Microsoft now offers $10 exam to people who got affected by COVID. So maybe if anyone in this audience has been affected by that, I think that's a really good chance. You just go, I think that was only $10 US, so that's almost nothing. So
that's amazing.
And they didn't ask for any proof or something. I'm not suggesting that you just do it anyway, but if there's anyone here who can, who may take advantage of this offer, I think that's a good opportunity.
That's very interesting information. I would be interested to, maybe we should sort of wait till after the session, but I would be interested to hear from anyone's experience that's done the DA100 exam. I personally haven't done it. I know it's quite comprehensive, but maybe we could put that as a discussion topic at the end. So thanks for sharing that, and I might investigate that myself for $10. We'll see. All right, Artiom, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Maybe you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we'll let you take over.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Thanks, Iman, Matt, for inviting me. It's really a great honor for me to be a presenter at Power BI Sydney User Group. Actually, I try not to miss any of the sessions. And so let me share my screen. Okay. So, yeah, as Iman and Matt said, my name is Artiom. I'm consultant working together with Iman in Agile Analytics. I've been part of that amazing team for almost 3 years now. You can find me on LinkedIn as well as Agile Analytics as a company and see some interesting articles and updates from the company. Today, I'll be talking about slicers, as you already know, but not in the maybe classic theoretical way, just explaining what are the slicers, etc. Instead, I'm going to share some interesting experience, tips and tricks that actually I learned during my consulting career, and which I usually use for my customers and to try make the experience better. So just a few words about agenda. So first of all, I'm going to walk you through the data model, a sample Power BI report and sample data model I'm going to use for demo. Then we'll create several basic and hierarchy slicers and configure them. After that, I'm going to talk about filtering slicers by fact table and why you may want to do that. The next section will be dedicated to date slicers and some interesting ways of using them and some unusual behavior that you may haven't noticed, but it is there. Another topic will be synchronizing slicers across all the pages, just a simple way of doing that, and then some advanced sync options. And finally, I will show you how to synchronize slicers with fields which are not related in any way, which is absolutely amazing. And finally, I will show some techniques of resetting groups of slicers and some issues related to the bookmarks when you try to use them together with slicers. So that's pretty much it. And not to waste time, let's start from the sample data set. So let me share the report that I'm going to use. Okay, I hope you all can see the report. All right, so for the demo session, I'm going to use a report that I created based on Contosa sales Power BI report downloaded from Microsoft, but for the presentation, I slightly changed it. Originally, it comes with the one fact table and multiple dimensions and with bidirectional relationships, which I thought would not be the best case for my demo. So I had to create another fact table because I wanted to show you some scenarios with multiple fact tables and change the relationships to single direction relationships. So as you can see, we've got some snowflake components like these dimensions and two fact tables. For those, well, I assume that most of the participants are familiar with tabular modeling principles and star schema. If not, I strongly recommend to learn about that because star schema is a fundamental knowledge. This knowledge is a fundamental for those who want to work with Power BI. All right, now a few words about the report itself. There are 4 pages of the report. So don't pay attention to the actual numbers or visuals. Those are not created for particular business scenarios. So my purpose was just to create a few pages with data from different fact tables and some visuals. So first page is the page that displays some numbers from the sales fact table. Which is this one. This fact table contains data about sales of particular products, amount of sales, returns. Well, actually, I have comments on the top of the page just as a reminder to tell us which fact table is used for the data on this page. Second page is returns. Actually, it shows number of returns, quantity and amount. Again, from the same sales fact table. The third one is from the second fact table. Now, the second fact table actually is, again, just created out of sales. I just used, I just created a calculated table. It doesn't make much sense in terms of business application. Again, but let's pretend those are just 2 fact tables which we need for our business scenarios. It contains some records with from the sales fact table, but let's say the second fact table is the one that contains returns with defects only. So sales fact tables has sales and returns, all of them. Return fact table, return with defects, has only sales and returns that had any defects. Okay, and the third one is the page that has measures that use numbers from both fact tables. And that will be used in a quite complicated scenario later. But I think this information is enough just to start. Now, let's start creating slicers. Well, I guess all of you have used slicers at least once, and we all understand how important are slicers for Power BI, because tabular modeling, all relationships, it's mostly about filtering, and well, we can say that. And slicers are, let's say, one of the main components which are used for filtering in Power BI. So I will start from creating a basic slicer for our channel dimension, which is this one. And for that, I will just pick the slicer visual. I will choose the field I want to use for that one. I will rename it right here just to make it more user-friendly. Let's say channel. Now, and let's do a basic configuration. So by default, when you add a text field to the slicer, it is shown as a list. Well, I don't want to have a list here. I will make it a drop down. I will slightly resize it so that is just enough to show the values. And usually I try to configure slicer in terms of design, just to use colors. And you see that I prepared some graphical elements here, just to highlight that sometimes it is a good idea to group slicers logically. For example, you can have a background and some separators for the slicers of one color for slices related to date or to products, and use some kind of indications, visual indications for users that those slicers belong to the same group. So these two guys are just for demo purposes. Of course, you can choose your way of doing that, but I just thought, okay, maybe I will show how sometimes I do that, group slicers. All right, so I want to slightly change the design settings, like picking a color for the item, maybe not this. I will make it a bit lighter, something like that. And what I also want to do, by default, slicers have these settings, which is selection control set to multi-select with control. So I usually switch it off when it's not requested or specifically requested. So you can do multiple selection by default. And when there are multiple elements, I also prefer to have select all option on, so that users can select all and, for example, the select one. So it's a basic configuration. Now we have our slicer, and so you see that the data is filtered when I select something, which of course what I wanted to achieve. Now let's create the second one, and the second one will be a hierarchy slicer. Just not to repeat all the configuration I've already done, I'm just copying my slicer, and I will put another fields here. Now, hierarchy slicer is something that was introduced in Power BI some time ago. Before that, there was a custom visual called hierarchy slicers, but eventually Microsoft made it possible with native slicer visual. And for hierarchies, you can use same table, so you can bring values from the same fact table or dimension or from the dimensions that are linked together. So like, for example, these geography stores or products. So for my slicers, for the first hierarchy slicer, I will use geography. So I will add first field, which will be region country name, and I will rename it to location. And the second one will be store. And so I'm going to add store name here, and I will also rename it to store. Okay, now it's very easy for users to find a country and then see what stores are in that particular country and select whole country or multiple countries or just a single store from or multiple store from a single country. So it's really, really useful. Now, my tip is when you've got multiple records, like you need to scroll, I suggest that you usually switch search option on. It makes it easier for users to find something by just typing. So for example, if I want to find the United States, so I just type it in the search menu, and so I can easily then select what I want. This is a good practice to have search on when you've got a long list of items in your slicer. Now, finally, the third one would be product. And for product, I've got in my model 3 dimension tables related to each other, which is category, subcategory, and product. And I'm going to use fields from there. All right, so let me delete these fields, and let's go to product category. Okay, so I'm removing product, then subcategory. And finally, product. So product, and I will rename it to product. All right.
Artiom, just sorry,
yes.
Quick question. So I think if you bring a column from another table that's not in the hierarchy, you get an error. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes, that's correct. So if you bring something from the table which is not related in that way, or not the same table, it will give you an error. And yeah, that's logical. That's actually what's expected. Now, so we've got our slicers ready. Okay, so how I'm going to use them. So I can select a particular channel, the data is filtered, then I can select country, and okay, what's happening? I see blanks. So now, and this brings us to the first, to the next topic, which is filtering by fact table. Now, imagine reaction of users who see that slicers, nice slicers, they select something. For example, another example. So I'm going to my products, and I see the products. I see, for example, this player black M1600. So I select it. I see all the sales for 2013. Okay, and then I go to a particular store and I select it, and I see blanks. Well, probably this is not the result that users want to see, because if they select something and they see blanks, they may have questions. Okay, what does blank mean? Is that an error? Is this something happening? Well, the answer for this particular situation is very simple. In our fact table, we don't have any product with this name, which we just selected, sold from this store. And therefore, when we select this combination, the result is blank. Well, there may be business scenarios when user may want to have blank results, but usually for business users, it's something they don't want to see. And to avoid that, I use a simple trick, which is filtering by fact table. So simply saying, I don't want to see any options of selections that will return me blank values. And to achieve that, you can do the following. So I created a simple measure in my fact table, sales fact table, which is just count rows. So what it does, it counts all rows in the fact table. There are some other suggestions and techniques that may be used for this scenario, but just for simplicity, I will use this one. What I can do, I can select a slicer, and with the built-in filters, I can say to Power BI to use this measure to filter the slicer. And what I did, I just dragged this measure that counts rows to the filter on this visual area of the selected slicer. And I'm saying that I want it to be selected by is not blank, and I apply it. Now I'm going to do that for all my slicers. And what is going to happen as a result? So now my slicers are filtered by the values that I have in the fact table only. So what's happening in the backend? Power BI checks these elements of the slicer. It goes to the fact table and it tries to count rows which are related to that values. If the result is blank, which means there are no rows, it will filter this slicer and will not show this value. But it doesn't make much sense when you speak about one slicer. Yes, of course, it makes sense. You will not see the values that are not there. But when you have group of slicers, it works in an amazing way. So the same product that we selected previously, this one, black player, okay? So when I select it, it also, now the page returns me the records in the fact table for that product only. But also, because we use that count rows measure to filter my slicers, it will not show me the stores where that selected product have never been sold, which means whatever I see here and whatever I select here will return me values. I will never see blanks. And this is very good way to filter slicers by the actual values, and users will never see blank results. So they know whatever they select, they will see actual results. And it will work the opposite way. So you see, we see that Armenia Kontoso Yerevan store here. But if we select it, because we didn't have sales for that black player, it disappears from the product slicer. So those slicers now filter each other by actual records in the fact table. Okay, so this is trick number one, which I usually use in almost all my reports, unless there is a requirement to show values, all values from the dimension, regardless records in the fact table. Okay, now let's continue and jump to date slicers. Now, when we create date slicers, so let's create one. I will pick again slicer visual, and I'm going to bring the date field. I've got it in my calendar dimension, date key. So I will rename it to date. And as you can see, by default, Power BI recognizes the format of the field that I brought in and changes the slicer type accordingly. So I can, as I said, if Power BI sees text value, it shows you only two options, list and drop down. But when it detects that this is date, it shows you a completely different list. Well, it also contains list and drop down, and we can still have drop down for dates. But by default, it suggests between, which is absolutely amazing. And so I'm going to continue working with this one at this moment. So the first thing, what I do with in between, and in between is just a slider that allows you to move the date from and date to, or pick them from calendar, and the page will be filtered by that date. So it will show you actually all records from that selected period. But first thing that I don't like in this slicer is these huge circles for the slider. It's, of course, it's my personal opinion, but I don't like them. So I usually switch them off by, well, I change them by switching off responsive option. So in my opinion, they look nicer this way. And I will also change a background for the items, again, just to make them a bit nicer. Right. And okay, now you mentioned, now you notice that we see period from 2005 until 2018. But if I select something from 2005 until 2008, etc., so we don't see data because there is no data for some period. But we already know the trick, right? We can filter it by fact table, and we can actually make the slicer show us only the period that returns some results. And in this case, you see, I applied this filter, and now it shows me the period from 2011 to 2013, which is exactly the period when we had sales in our fact table. Now, this is a very good trick that I usually use for that slicer as well, because this slicer now becomes informative. Not only it shows, it gives you the opportunity to select period, but also it shows to users when we had sales, for which period we had sales. Now, when we have this applied, my expectation would be that if I select a particular product, it should show me the period only when that product was sold. But that's exactly the behavior that is a bit unusual for the slicers. So if I select the product, you see this product obviously was sold only in 2013. But by some reason, the slicer didn't change. So it still shows me 2011. Why? And the answer is very interesting. Well, you know, probably most of you are familiar with the format and interactions setting, which is actually something that shows how visuals on the page filter each other. So if you switch it on, you can see these icons on top of the visuals. And if you select one, you will see which visuals are affected by or filtered by that one. So if I don't want, for example, a visual to be filtered by this slicer, I select the slicer, I switch it to none, and then whatever I do will not affect that visual. Okay, but this is not what I'm going to tell you. So the reason why we don't see the actual dates for the selected product is because by default, when you have date slicer between, Power BI changes it to none for other slicers. And the most interesting thing is if I change it now to list, Power BI will change this for me. So you see, again, I'm now it is filtered by category, subcategory, product, and on my list or drop down, I will only see the dates that are actually in the fact table for that product. But as soon as I change it back to between, that interactions will change to no, which probably we should know, because if you use this slicer and if you like to filter by fact table, then probably this is something that you need to remember. So when you have in between, always check interactions and configure them as you want it to be. Now, when we figure out what happened, so we can change it. So I will switch it to filter for my existing slicers. And by that, I will achieve what I wanted to achieve. So when I select a particular product or category, the slicer will show me only that period when the product was sold, which is exactly what I wanted to have. Now, in addition to between slicer, I usually try to use another one, which is absolutely amazing slicer again. So I will switch the interactions for now, and I will bring, I can actually copy this one. And I will change it to relative date. Well, relative date is a very nice way of filtering things, because it offers you to say, okay, I want to see last, next, or this, and then you select year, month, day, week, and then you can put number, how many days, weeks, or months you want to see. So for this one, I will say that I want to see last 10 years. And so I will deselect my product. And so if I start changing that to 9, so let's say 9, you see that my visuals change, and I see less data. Well, because the data is populated until 2013 only, and we don't have data up to date, that doesn't make much sense to show last few weeks or last where we will see blanks. But in real world, usually you have data up to date, and you can see last couple of weeks or last few days, etc., which is very, very handy. But in addition to that, okay, by the way, let me change that input background again so they will look nicer. In addition to that, what I really like to do, I like to use these two slices together in this way. So now let me check the interactions again. I want this slicer to be filtered by my relative date slicer. And what I usually do, I put them next to each other and create an impression or illusion like they are a single slicer. And when users interact with them, the first thing they do, they set boundaries saying, okay, last 10 years. And then they can adjust that setting by sliding these boundaries here, which is pretty much intuitive and very useful. So by having this combination as a single slicer, you improve user experience and make things easier and maybe more intuitive for them.
Artiom, can I just interrupt, please? There was a question from the audience. So Greg Lowe is on the call, and he's asked about the relative date slices as it impacts UTC. And so I think the problem is that if you say, show me the last 2 days, and it's say 9 a.m. in the morning in Sydney, and UTC is, you know, whatever it is, -10, it can be offset by a day depending. So you'll get a different result before 10 a.m. and a different result after 10 a.m.
Yes.
I don't know if I explained that well enough, Greg, but that's my understanding of the problem.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. One of the problems I've got, timber mills I'm dealing with, they work all night long and they do hourly stuff. And so the relative date things would be really cool, but just all being UTC based, it's just useless.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a kind of pain. And Matt, if you remember, we discussed it once when we had a project at Transport for New South Wales. I also asked you if there is a way. So I think you've got some articles about time intelligence, etc. But yeah, in general, that's an issue. So if you're showing the last few days, so it will change somewhere in the morning for Sydney, etc. So it's in UTC.
Yeah, and so Mike Honey's just posted a solution that he uses to convert to change the time zone, basically. I actually wasn't aware of that date time zone switch function, but I normally I use UTC time. I do the conversion to UTC and then go from there. But thanks for that solution, Mike.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's just where I've got customers, you know, like who are in Melbourne, all of their work's in Melbourne, all of their clients are in Melbourne. They don't have the slightest interest in having any, you know, date except Melbourne.
Yep. Okay, so let me continue. Now, the third piece that I usually, what I can add here would be probably another slicer for date. Well, let me create one from the scratch. And that will be a hierarchy slicer from my calendar table. And I will put year, month, name, and I will change it to just month, and date itself here. Well, depending on, and I will obviously make it a drop down. And so I will put it here on top of that background with just dividers, and I will change background for item to white. Now you can usually when you have a rich date dimension table, you may have quarters, fiscal years, weekdays, weekends, day names like from Monday to Sunday, public holidays and things. And you can always add them to your report as well in the same group of date, and which I usually do when there are requirements for that. But for this case, I will just stop here. And so as you can see now, I will also add my filter by fact table so that I can see only the values already selected. And all right, so here I've got my date slicer, which is actually users can start from selecting number of last days, years, weeks, months. Then they can adjust the interval for that. And then they can pick a particular month from that interval or particular dates. Oh, I will change the selection options here to multiple. Yeah, like here. So like this, something like this, which is a kind of a good way of presenting date slicers for users. Of course, it depends on business scenario, but this is the way I usually use it in the reports. Now let's continue and jump to the sync slicers topic. Okay, synchronizations of slicers is very important and good way of having slicers configured when you've got multiple pages and you use same slicers for all of them, right? And the classical way of doing that is just copying one slicer, taking it to another page, pasting, and Power BI will ask you if you want to sync it. Okay, so if you say yes, the slicers, two slicers will be synchronized, which means selecting something on one page will automatically be selected on another page. So I'm selecting something here, going to my sync slicer, it is already here. Okay, this is great. Now I'm going to undo that and we'll remove that slicer from the page. The second way of adding slicers to other pages is this. So you can actually go to the view section, sync slicers. And when you select slicer, you see a list of your pages and the icons for whether your slicer, well, telling you if the slicer is visible on the page and if it is synchronized. So if you have synchronized slicers, you will see ticks here. But you can also use this pane just to synchronize them across all pages. So if I click sync for that slicer now, it will automatically add visual tick, visibility tick to all pages and will create the same slicer already synchronized on all pages. And what's important, at the same location. So you don't need to move it or copy paste it. So it's already there and it is already synchronized, which is very, very handy. So that's another way of doing that. This is also can be done. So let me just undo that. Okay. The same behavior you will see if you select slicers individually like this. So I selected them, I copy them, and I paste them, and it asked me if I want to sync them. Okay, this is also will work. But there is one but. So if you have, and this is just a tip, just a thing to remember. So if you've got your slicers grouped as a single group, by some reason, Power BI does not recognize them as slicers if you copy them as a group. So now I haven't selected slices individually, I just selected a group. And when I copy them, yes, they are copied, but no one asked me if I wanted to synchronize them. And as a result, they are not synchronized. Of course, I can synchronize them manually after that, and that will work. But this is just a thing to remember. Okay. Now, before we jump to some advanced sync options, what I will do, I will let me copy paste all my slicers to all the pages. I will probably start from from the background, so we have them look similarly. Just pasting, and now I will take my slicers. I will select them individually. I'm copying and pasting them to all the pages, saying that I want to synchronize them. Here and here. Okay, nice. Now, when I've got them here, we can talk about advanced sync options. So if you pay attention to the sync slicers pane, you will see that there is an advanced options menu, which sometimes people just don't notice and don't pay attention to them, but those are very interesting things. So there are 2 ticks. They say sync field changes to other slicers and sync filter changes to other slicers. And they do exactly what is described here. So here is an example. So if we have sync field changes to other slicers on, and you've got, for example, we have this channel slicer synchronized across all pages. What I'm going to do on one page, I'm going just to change the field that I use for this slicer and have promotion instead of channel. Okay. Now, because I have this tick on, that will be applied to all slicers synchronized on all pages. So if you don't want that to happen, you need to switch it off. Now, the second one is filtering. And that is exactly what we have used for syncing. Well, it can be applied for syncing slicers for fact table or any other filters that you use for slicers, but that will have the same behavior. So if you have this on, so you see on all pages, we already have the slicers filtered by fact table, but with this tick on, if I change that filtering settings for one slicer, it will also be applied for others. Now, and here is a case where I don't want that to happen. Remember, we have different fact tables, and on different pages, we have different data from different fact tables, which logically brings us to the conclusion, well, if I filter this slicer on this page based on sales fact table, I probably want to filter my slicer on this page based on returns with defect fact table, because it's a different fact table, different data set, right? So, and to do that, I can still keep these slicers synchronized but filtered in a different way. So I will switch off this sync filter changes to other slicers. I will keep filtering settings for channel on these 2 tables, which have data from sales fact table. But on this page, I'm going to remove this filter and bring the similar measure from my second fact table, which is count rows for that one. I will do exactly the same, and that will work, but that will not change the slicer setting on this page, okay, which is exactly what I want. Now, on this one, I want to have both. I want to have sales and I want to have returns, so I will switch it off, and I will bring the second one from sales here. Okay, my sales fact table. Not blank. Okay, so now I have synchronized slicers across all my pages, but I have different filters applied to them on different pages, which can be very handy in some business scenarios, for example, like this one. Now, that's about advanced, but this is not all. That brings us to the next topic, which is syncing not related slicers. Now, before we jump to that, I need to give you some information about fields that I created for this demo. Okay, now as a business case, that's not really a good example, but again, just pretend this is what we need. In my sales table, I have a warranty field, which has some values, okay? And I have the field warranty in the second fact table, which has same values, okay? So it's a kind of similar field, similar values, but I have them in different fact tables, which do not filter each other. Well, in ideal world, I would, of course, say, okay, if we have these similar fields in different fact tables, I would probably want to create a dimension, which will be warranty with that values in that dimension, and I will have relationship to the fact tables. Yes, absolutely, I agree. But let's pretend by some reasons we cannot do that. And there may be some reasons. So, for example, you connect live to some data set which has this situation, and you cannot create dimension, or maybe there are multiple fact tables and there are fields, so you don't need to create the dimension by some reason. So some reasons. Let's say we have a valid reason why we cannot have the dimension. So what to do in this case? Well, it turns out you can still have slicers that have, so if you try to create slicers, for example, if I bring in new slicer here on the page with sales fact tables, and I will say, okay, I want warranty to be here. So I'm looking for my warranty field. Here it is. I will leave it as a list. There are only 3 values. Let me just have some background for the values. Okay, now I'm taking this slicer to, let's check. So it, from the sales fact table, it filters what I want it to filter. Okay, so I will switch this off. Now I'm going to copy this slicer to returns page. I'm synchronizing it. It works. Yes, it works. Is it synchronized? It is synchronized. Perfect. Now, but as you imagine, if I paste it and synchronize it to the page which has data from returns fact table, which is different fact table, nothing is going to happen. Okay, yeah, obviously. So this page cannot be filtered by the field from sales fact table. Okay, so what I can do, I can create another slicer. I can create a slicer from returns fact table, and that will be warranty from that one. Again, so let me do some configuration. Background. And well, now that works perfectly well, but of course it will not work here because that's a different field, different slicer. So what to do? Well, it turns out the solution is very simple, and so simple. In the advanced options of this slicer synchronization, we've got this field called enter. Well, it says there is no name for this field, but it says enter a group name to sync selection to any other visuals with that group name. Now, what you can actually do, you can, and when you synchronize slicers, Power BI itself creates a group with the name of that field that you use for synchronization. But it turns out you can use this field and you can change it manually. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say that I will have a group with the name warranty. And let's say all. It really doesn't matter how you name it. But the key thing is, and I'm going to switch off filtering and changes to other slicers. The key thing is that you use the same name for other slicers. So I just copied that name. I'm going to my returned fact table, and I'm replacing that one here. And I'm going to another page and also replacing the group here. So what I actually did, I applied the same group name for the slicers with same values, but from different tables, not connected tables. And see what's going to happen. I change value on my one page. It is synchronized, and it works just like I have a dimension, or the slicer. The slicers are perfectly synchronized. So the only condition I have the similar, well, same values in both fields. And even without having any relationship between those fields in the data model, I can use them just like I have a common dimension. So you see, as simple as that, and so nice and easy, and you can actually do that with any number of tables and fields. Okay. Now, let's make things a bit more complicated. Okay, so we've got this fourth page. Well, with those two pages, it's now understandable, and we kind of fixed the thing. So sales fact table, all good. Sales fact table, all good. Defects fact table, all good. But what to do when we have data from both fact tables? Now on this page, I use measures that do calculations across those two fact tables. So I take one number from one fact table, then do some calculations with numbers from another fact table, and I show some results. Now, if I want to filter them, so if I bring a slicer from one fact table, for example, from let's say sales. Okay. So it will, of course, it will work, but it will filter only the data that is coming from sales, and the results, yes, the result changes, but the calculation results are not correct because I have measures that use data from both tables. So now what's happening? The data that is coming from sales table is being filtered, but data that is coming from returns fact table is not being filtered. And that's a problem because I show incorrect numbers. Okay. Now, what I can do, I can have a second filter with warranty field from my, oops, sorry, the wrong place, this one. From returns fact table. And now, okay, this filter also filters data only from one fact table. Ideally, what I want to have is something like this, but I don't want to have two filters on the same page, right? Well, the solution is again related to that advanced options, and again is related to the group name. We already have a name, we already have a group for the slicers, which is warranty all. And actually I can use the same approach for slicers even on the same page. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say that these two slicers will be synchronized by the same group. And now watch this. I'm changing value for the one slicer, and the second changes automatically, which is absolutely amazing. Now the only thing I need to do, so I need to hide one slicer, make it invisible, and that's it. I probably want to change the name so it is not confusing. Now, even though the second slicer is hidden, it still works in the background, and you can actually switch it on and check. So I'm hiding it. I'm changing something, showing. You see it changed. So it actually, even though it is hidden, it will continue to work, and that will create an impression and the result like you have a single slicer synchronized across all pages despite those two fields are coming from different fact tables, which is absolutely amazing. And yeah, I guess that's it for slicer synchronization. And the last part of my presentation is resetting slicer groups. Well, this one is a pretty simple trick and the approach that many of consultants I know that use, but anyway, I thought it might be good mentioning it. So when you've got multiple slicers and multiple slicers group on the page, sometimes users do some quite complicated selection. So they go into one category, select something in one group, then they go to another, and then they go to dates, etc. And to go back to reset all the stuff, they need to go individually to each slicer and drop them. But what if I want to just reset this group of slicer, not changing this one in one go? Okay, so it's again, there is a good solution, and you can use bookmarks for that. So what you can do, and we will do that now. So I will select the slicers from the same group, which is a product group, logically. I will go to the bookmark section, and I will create a new bookmark. Okay, I will call this bookmark reset product filters. And then I need to do some important changes in the bookmark settings. I must say that this bookmark must affect only selected visuals. So I'm changing that. Also, I don't want to change current page or show and hide. So I have only these options selected, selected visuals and data. Now, when I make sure that all that is selected and my slicers that must be affected are also selected, I update bookmark when the slicers are set to all. Okay, so I update, I recorded the bookmark. Now, whatever I'm going to change in these slicers, all of them can be reset by just single click on this bookmark, which is great. But to make it even more easier for users, we can link this bookmark to the button that I created. So it's just, you can use insert and button, or actually just shape. And when you have it, you can link a bookmark to it from the action menu. So you can switch on action for that button. You can say, I want a bookmark, and you can choose reset product filter bookmark, which we just created. Okay, that will work perfectly well for that visual. So now I'm going to click it and my slicers are reset. I will do the same for my date slicers. I will create another bookmark and will say this is reset date filters. So remember, we need to say that I want to affect only selected visuals and only data. Okay, my slicers are selected. I'm updating bookmark, and I already have the button here. So I will just link this bookmark to the button. Reset date slicers. Oh, sorry, there is a typo. Okay. And let's see, I select something, I click it. Sorry. Okay, now if you, you can imagine now that if I select something here, well, this bookmark will not affect this slicer. So I can easily create such reset buttons for groups of slicers and make life for users a bit easier when they want just to reset a group of slicers, not affecting other slicers. Okay, and in some scenarios, also a good practice is to have reset button for all page. Like if you especially if you have some maybe metrics, visuals, or something that you change on the page and multiple slicers. So you want to reset everything in one go. So you can use a bookmark for all. But before that, I want to show you one thing that is related to slicers again. So before creating this bookmark, I will. Oh, actually, no, I will create it. So let's create it. Let's call it reset all. And I will say all visuals. I just don't want to change current page and display. So my visuals are, yes, are in the default state. So I'm updating this bookmark. I'm assigning it to this visual, reset all. Let's see how it works. I'm selecting something on multiple slicers. And by clicking this reset button, I'm resetting everything. Perfect. Now, one thing you need to remember, which is kind of tricky, and I noticed it. I noticed something was wrong with my report, but I couldn't understand what was happening. It turns out that if you have your reset all bookmark recorded before you create a slicer, you may have some issues with that. So I will show that to you. Now I'm creating a new slicer. All right, so I am configuring it. I'm just bringing in something, let's say again, promotion name, like this. And what I do now, I'm changing it to drop down. Okay, it works perfectly well. Yeah, I've got this drop down slicer. But watch this. I'm going to use my reset all bookmark, and what will happen to my slicer? It changed to list. So it turns out when you have your reset all bookmark recorded before you create and configure your slicer, by some reason, it will change its setting to list, to the default. And just to fix that, you need to update your bookmark after you configure your last slicer. Otherwise, you can publish your report, it will look nice, but when users click reset, they will see a different slicer type. So now I change the configuration, I will update my slicer, reset all bookmark. And so now it will work just as we need it. So it will not change the slicer type. And that brings us to the end. Well, I hope that tips and tricks is something that will be useful for your projects. And I'm happy to answer a question if there are. And I will send the final report with all that configuration to Iman and Matt so that they can share with you guys.
So Artiom, that was fantastic. And this has actually been a very positive experience for me, and hopefully I see some comments from the chat about people really liking the content. I mean, there's so much value in staying in a very narrow focused area but going very deep. And you know, I'd be surprised if there wasn't if everyone didn't learn at least one thing from that presentation. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there are a few questions that have come in, and Artiom, maybe it would be just easier if you had a look at the chat. I don't know if you can bring up the chat.
Okay.
And I might start off. So there was one from Roland back at 6 p.m. And he was asking just a general question on your views on the difference between using the pop-out filters pane on the side versus putting a slicer on the canvas. Do you have a view as to when and why you would use each of those?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and actually I expected I expected it. Let me share my screen again. So I will share it. Okay, now it really depends on what audience are going to use your report, I would say. Usually when I know that the report is going to be used by not experienced user, just business people who have no idea any idea about data models, filtering, etc., I try not to show filter pane because it may be a bit confusing for people. So they see some numbers here on the right. They see some basic advanced top, so that they can get lost in it. Of course, it's very powerful tool. Of course, it just provides you some functionality that you cannot easily achieve with the slicers on your page. And if you going to prepare reports for someone who going to explore data and understand data, obviously that's a good thing to have. But when I create reports for business people, as I said, with not good understanding of what's going on in the background, I usually prefer not to show them that complex, let's say, filters pane and just give them the slicers that are required by the business and only to do the things they want to do. So nothing else. But with advanced and power users, of course, so there is no reason not to give them filters pane.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, so I'll just keep asking unless there's a more complex one. So there was a question about, you showed how to sync slices across multiple pages.
Yep.
Is there a way to basically remove the synced slices from multiple pages easily? So if you deselect those buttons, does it remove the filters or does it just stop making them visible?
Okay, so if we go to sync again here, we've got this slicer synchronized. If you just want to desynchronize them, and keep them visible on the page, but not synchronized, you just deselect these ticks. Okay, so it will keep them visible, but will deselect. If you want just to remove them, then you can just delete them or just can untick.
So unticking hides them though, right? So if you untick everything, have they actually gone from the other page?
Oh, it's a good question. We can actually check. I think they're deleted because this visible is not visible like on selection. But let's check that.
No, Artiom, I think that keeps the slicer, so that will filter that page, but it won't show the slicer.
If you just untick this, but if you untick
yes.
both, then probably it will.
And that means there's object that is not even doing anything. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay, I'm just reading a question from Shirley.
Thanks, Matt. I'm happy to speak to it.
Yeah, that might be easy. That might be easier, Shirley.
Yeah,
thank you.
Because when I was typing, I'm like, this is getting quite long.
Please,
yeah.
go ahead.
So hi everyone, and thanks for running the training session. By the way, I'm a new Power BI user, so I've sort of just been thrust into this. So basically, the context is we already had the dashboard set up, and the staff member that looked after it, he basically configured a gateway where it's pulling the data from a SharePoint Excel spreadsheet. So in theory, every time it should be refreshing the dashboard based on the data in the spreadsheet. So since he's left, they've asked me to add new data, but the new data isn't showing on the dashboard, and I can't seem to figure out why.
Matt, do you want to?
Are you refreshing data somehow, like by scheduling data refresh, or?
Yeah. So the data, it's scheduled to refresh, and then and I've been checking that the data set is refreshed and the report is refreshed, but it's not picking it up. So what I've done is I've actually downloaded the PBI file to my desktop, and then I'm finding it does pick up the data, but I have to manually sort of like filter the data to put it in there. It's not like picking it up automatically.
It's a very specific question, Shirley, and unfortunately the answer is it really depends, and there's a reason, and I guess you know that, but so it just takes some investigation. So without actually seeing the specifics.
Yeah, I know it's a bit tricky.
Yeah.
Am I better off on am I better off just disregarding the gateway and trying to rebuild the spreadsheet myself and seeing if that fixes the problem? Because it's a bit hard when I'm sort of like picking up someone else's work, so I don't know what they've configured and what they haven't configured.
Do you want to
I don't know, that's a gateway issue, but what you did is correct. I mean, to download PBIX and try to load it manually to see if that even works at the report level, because you try to kind of like narrow down the issue to either report, data model, maybe a visual level filter that is impacting this, maybe some other things in the report. So yes, that's the good approach to narrow down and see if this is actually in the report refresh, or that's I mean in the report data gateway or something else inside report. But as Matt said, it's really hard to tell you anything without seeing that.
Yeah, it's very specific.
If you go to your schedule data refresh and see the history with no error, that means that at least the refresh finished successfully. And if you see that data in the data set, that means you are loading data, but then there's something in the report, maybe a filter somewhere that is not easy to find, or you can hover mouse and you see the filters that are impacting each visual. Maybe there is a filter somewhere else, or drill down or drill through, that is impacting that visual, and you don't see that easily.
So one last thing from me. So if I was solving this problem, I would download a copy of the PBIX. I would check the source location of the source data and make sure it's pointing to the right location. My gut feel is that maybe the source data is in a different location. But both Iman and I both run consulting businesses. We help people with problems like this. Is the same for everyone. So feel free to reach out to us. I mean, we're running a business. We do this side gig for free, but the cost of not solving problems is high as well, right? And so I can't speak for Iman's business, but if you want to reach out to me, I do all my work on a 5-minute bucket. So if you come to me and I fix a problem in 15 minutes, I'll send you an invoice for 15 minutes work. So feel free to reach out if you'd like to do that.
All right, thanks, Mark.
Okay, other comments?
I think there was a question about performance impact of the adding.
So maybe it's the fact level measure. Artiom, in the slicer, is there a performance hit? You're on mute, mate.
Sorry. Well, I can say that obviously you can have a more complex measures for filtering slicers, and there you must be really, really careful. But with count rows one, I can say that I used that approach for fact tables with literally couple of billions of rows, and it worked perfectly well. So count rows is a very simple measure. It's not complicated at all. And in terms of performance, I never had any issues with that. If you're going to go another way and use more complicated measures, which also can be the case, and I encourage you to experiment with that and use that capability, not only for the example I showed to you. This is a great field for experimenting. Just be careful, because if you have complicated measure, it can really impact the performance.
Okay. And I would agree. I've seen exactly the same thing. So don't do distinct count of the key, or you shouldn't have a primary key in your fact table anyway. But try and avoid more complex measures. I agree, Artiom. Okay, there's an off-topic question here from Maya about referencing a few column measures. So I'm not sure what you mean there. There's calculated columns and their measures. So it's one or the other. It sounds like maybe you've got calculated columns. This is a big topic in its own right. As a general rule, I advise against using calculated columns. If you go to my website, which is, and in fact, I'll send you the link to it. So my website is acceleratorbi.com.au, and I have an article called Columns versus Measures, and it will tell you why you should not, or you should try to avoid using calculated columns. This is not answering your question. Your question is why, when you do a refresh, is there an error? Well, I'm not sure. There shouldn't be. But I think there's a bigger underlying issue that unless there is some very specific circumstance, you probably should be using a measure rather than a calculated column, assuming that that's what's happening. There was a comment there from Alan about a couple of things for to check for. Was it Sarah? Okay, so I'll let you read that.
Some people ask me about the exam. Maybe we can also cover some of the tips about Power BI DA100.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what was the questions about the debt? Because the upfront. So I think you found out, Iman, that if you're out of work, you can do the $10 exam, right? So.
I actually double check that it's $15, not 10. But if I just quickly share my screen. I found something interesting, that is the exam is changing in a couple of weeks. So this is the Power BI exam DA100, as you know, and as you see here, from November 23rd, they are going to change it. So and this is the offer, that is $15 for students and people who are impacted. But I click on that, it didn't ask me anything, so I think that's just, they trust you, and I don't know, if you're a student or if you think you got impacted by COVID, you can do that exam.
Iman, probably it is worth mentioning, I'm not sure about this year, but last year when I did that exam, I did it for free just because I attended Microsoft Ignite. So I'm not sure if this is the same this year.
Good point. I attended Ignite, I didn't get such offer, but maybe there is such offer, I don't know. Anyone knows about that? Anyway, when I downloaded the exam skill measure, this is what's changed, and looks like there are only 2 red highlighted items here. That, to me, that's nothing, but configure small multiplies and create pivot table from a Power BI dataset in Excel. So not much is going to change according to this. That's only, those 2 items that I mentioned, and that's it. So if you want to do exam before or after, I think there's not much different, except that you need to learn those 2 topics, which shouldn't take you more than maybe 10 minutes. Honestly, that's not much different. Anyone done the exam recently? Because my exam was when it was beta, it was ages ago, and probably many things changed since then.
Yeah, I did the exam. It was not better already, but I must say that was the first exam in my life that I did not preparing to it and relying only on my knowledge and experience. It was a bit tough without preparation, but I was extremely happy that I passed it. The advice I would give would be, probably there is a learning pass from Microsoft, official learning pass recommended for preparation for that exam. So you can at least go there and check your knowledge. If you can easily answer all the questions that are there, then probably you're very close to be ready. Maybe you can just think if there is something you need to improve. But if you struggle with that questions in that learning pass, which is free, you don't need to pay for that. You don't need, there is material and there are some questions. So if you struggle with some areas in that learning pass questions, that probably it's a bit early for you to schedule the exam, and you need to work on that area.
Okay, great. And is it Folmy has just shared a link to LinkedIn that gives a little bit more detail to that special offer. So thanks for sharing that link. And yeah, so it looks like they're a little bit flexible on who you can. They're basically saying anyone that has had their livelihoods disrupted due to COVID. So I would say anyone that's lost a day's work or been furloughed for a period of time, it's a great opportunity. So thanks for sharing those links. Okay, well, look, I think we'll wrap it up. So thank you very much, Artiom, for your top quality presentation. Iman, you recorded this. Are we going to be sharing this? Did we check with Artiom if it's okay to do that?
Yes, we will share the slides, and I'll get the files from Artiom so we can upload everything. If that's okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks all for joining, and we'll we'll post the next meeting on Meetup shortly. Once we work it out, won't we, Martin? Okay. Thanks all.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.